All right, hello YouTube. We should be good. Hopefully we are. But as you guys can see by the title, we are going to be doing a kind of Maester conspiracy type of stream. Now, I've done these videos in the past. They are pretty popular on my channel. It's one of my favorite, it's actually not one of my favorites. It is probably my favorite theory to talk about. And so we're just going to do a stream. We're going to talk about some of the moments that are a little bit sus. How those gray worms that, we like to call them, what are they up to, right? There's implications with them all over House of the Dragon. It'll be interesting to see if we get more of that. We saw a little bit of it in the first season, but it wasn't a ton. We didn't really see it in Game of Thrones at all, unfortunately. But, it is what it is. But it's kind of littered all throughout the Targaryen dynasty. Fire and Blood, one of the reasons that it's one of my favorite books, even though it is kind of just a history. It's not like a normal story. One of the reasons it is my favorite is because of that unreliable narrator and all of that. And it kind of features into the Maester conspiracy theory. Hi, Matthew. Matthew is, the guy that approved of this idea. So you have him to thank or blame for this stream. Whichever you want, I guess. We got our tea, of course, as always. We have our tea. But before we kind of start diving into the topic, for anyone joining the stream, anyone that, is rewatching this as a video, let me know down in the comments of the chat how your day was. Hi, FaZe Diamond, how are you? Matthew, how was your day? What'd you do? You do anything fun today? But yeah, so kind of looking at, I guess, just to set the groundwork for where this theory goes, there's a lot of variations to this theory. Some people have this idea of the Grand Maester conspiracy goes throughout all of the Maesters. All of the Maesters are involved in this idea of, getting rid of the dragons, getting rid of the Targaryens, getting rid of magic, having their own agenda. And so I am someone that maybe doesn't go that far. I am someone that thinks that the Grand Maester conspiracy really travels to kind of the upper roots of the Maesters, because you can't tell everybody, right? If you told everybody, oh yeah, we're trying to get rid of the dragons, we don't like the Targaryens and all of these things, well, eventually it would leak out, right? Eventually it would become more well-known to the public, and that just isn't the case. So you'd have to think it's more of a tight thing, right? And so that's where I kind of come in. I think it's more of like the people that are in charge of the Grand Maesters, the people a little bit that are more in charge is kind of where I look at it. And I think the first like groundwork you kind of have to do for this theory is you kind of have to connect the High Towers, the Maesters, the Septons. You kind of have to all connect them. You have to understand where their roots come from, so that when we look at the motivations and why I loop a lot of these people together, it's because, again, they have a lot of the same beliefs, ideologies, the same motivations. Again, the main place before the Targaryens, pretty much the main place in Westeros was Old Town. It was one of the most populated places in Westeros. And when you have things like the Starry Sept being kind of like this main place for the faith, you have, again, basically the college of Westeros, and for the Maesters in Old Town, you have everything basically for the central hub of a bunch of groups of people that wouldn't like the Targaryens. Think about, again, the faith. The Targaryens basically spit in the face of the faith. You have, again, these ideas of incest. You have Aegon, who marries multiple wives. They are quite literally the opposite of what the faith would believe in, and that's, again, why we see a lot of issues with a character like Aenys and how he has to deal with the fallout of that. Like, his father could get away with things, but he cannot, because he hasn't proven himself. And that kind of trickles all the way down to Maegor. But yeah, let me get back into some chats. The guy, the king, is holiness, the myth, legend, and god. Oh dear. What if Lyanna Stark lived, and any theories on what took her? Personally, Joel, I have no theories about her personally. And I'm probably, in this stream, I'm going to just stick to the Maester stuff, but I'm not sure what would happen if Lyanna Stark had lived. Oh, and the mod of one of the best channels, Goblin Gang for Life. Matthew, you are the goated mod. I will say on the channel, you are the best mod. I will give you your flowers. I can't hate on you too much. Hi Mar, how are you? went hunting all day, then had some steak and did a load off, or took a load off. I worded that really weirdly. So you did some manly things. Matthew was doing his man things today. He was hunting and he was getting that steak. But that sounds fun. What were you hunting, Matthew? Were you hunting any boars? All right. Well, so continuing on. So again, we have this idea that you have the Hightowers, who again are the people that help fundamentally bring a lot of these organizations in there. And when you look at, again, a lot of Hightowers are in very big positions, whether that's Maesters, whether that's, again, being a High Septon, all of these things, the Hightowers constantly are involved in this. And so when we see all these things play out, when we get further into the theories, when we look at, for instance, this is one of the biggest things that I think goes under the radar with this theory. And that's why I bring it up so much when it comes to Maegor stuff or anything around this idea, is that when we look at the idea of Maegor, so Maegor, his initial marriage, or I guess it was more like Visenya's idea here, is that, Maegor should marry another Targaryen. And so, and at that point, with Rhaena, and that was Aenys' first child, it didn't look like, there was another child. There was like a really big idea of this succession crisis because Aenys didn't have a male heir at this point. So it made sense for Maegor to marry her. That would unite both of the claims. It actually probably would have avoided a lot of conflict. But this is denied by the Faith, Grand Maester, pretty much everybody, right? With the Hightower kind of faction, denies it. And also, the person that is in charge of this and the one that ends up suggesting the Hightower that Maegor ends up marrying is a Hightower. So, very suspicious. And we see that this doesn't work, right? This doesn't end up actually panning out. But it's very interesting. And I think it's very interesting to even look at Aegon as a character where he understood the value of having the Faith on your side, getting into the customs of Westeros and the Faith, because he ends up taking on their faith, even though he fundamentally didn't really seem like he had any connections to it. He takes it. Now, why does he do that? Because the actual strength right now and the influence that Old Town has at this point is extremely large. Think about Aegon, one of the only couple places we know that he actually went to in Westeros before his conquest is Old Town. They are the hub and the source of communication, right? And I'm someone right now that I'm really studying right now in one of my classes at college is the idea of how we get information, right? If you guys think about where we are right now in civilization, most of the things that we are learning are through media. And media means, again, books, the news, YouTube. This is media. So YouTube videos. You guys are getting knowledge on A Song of Ice and Fire stuff or any other bullshit I tell you guys. But anything like that, think about, this is a very interesting question that one of my professors asked to the class. And it's like, what do we really know that isn't from the media? And so when you think about that, it's like there's very few things, right? Because back in, before we had, the newspaper, all these things where it was just you had your local community, so stories would pass down, so you would learn things that way. That's not really the case anymore, right? We know everything. You can look anything up on the internet that you want to find out. And so when you connect that to A Song of Ice and Fire, well, who is in control of the way information spreads? The Maesters, right? Lady Dustin is not wrong in this, right? They control all of the information. When does winter begin? Well, the Maesters tell that. When, educating our, generations in A Song of Ice and Fire or the people is up to the Maesters. That's not something that, for instance, Catelyn would do, right? Catelyn is not the person that is giving information to Sansa and Arya. It's other people. It's Luwin, who is really the person that, again, is in charge with their educations. We see this with Bran as well. So then when you put that onto a larger scope and you say, okay, wait a second, they can completely dictate what is good or bad, what they value, right? Like we even see this again with Aenys. The Faith, the Maesters, all they are the people that are basically saying, "Oh yeah, we shouldn't like the Targaryens and Aenys specifically." That's why, like, and this is the thing: the Faith's power, in my opinion, went down like after this point. Like they had much more power, and then as the Targaryen dynasty started to continue, they continued to lose power, and especially with that idea because it just didn't really work out for them, right? They had their points, and then when you get them disarmed with Maegor, which is one of the reasons I think Maegor is so important to the Targaryen dynasty, it cripples them quite a bit because they don't really have that army that they can use. Now they can still do it in other ways. They can influence by, again, just how much influence they have over the people. So again, that's kind of the groundwork and the starting block of where you look at this theory. Sorry, I missed a lot of chats while I was doing that little spiel. Hi, Josh. And yes, this is one of my favorite theories and stuff like that. Are we going to get into the Old Town conspiracy? Josh, I'm not exactly sure which part you're talking about. If you're talking about like in the normal story, how the Hightowers really aren't involved and Lord Hightower is just kind of like sitting up there in the high tower, we'll probably get towards that, maybe towards the end of the stream, if that's what you're talking about, Josh. But yeah, let me know. Actually, Moose. Okay, love to see that. Thank you, Paul, for saying this is a cool topic. I passed the exams. I joined the college law. I am very proud of you, Mar. I would like a round of applause or congratulations to Mar. That is very impressive. That's more than I could ever do. So very proud of you, Mar, as always. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Family. Yes, this is true, Matthew. So okay, going back to that question that I actually did ask, like, what do we know outside of like media? So again, you could go with things like self-discovery. So understanding, like looking at yourself critically and understanding, okay, what are my weaknesses? What are my flaws? What are things I can do better? If you look at just cognitive abilities, so walking, things that you just naturally like learn, you didn't really like watch a tutorial on how to do. Speaking, I guess speaking could be something you learn from like your parents or something like that. But yeah. Two people may have completely different opinions on the same topic because they watch a different channel. Exactly, right? That's something that's very interesting about media and things of that just nature, right? I mean, think about how something is phrased, Paul, right? You could have, this is something that I think is very important when we get to like the House of the Dragon era or the Dance of the Dragons era, where it's like, what were the Maesters actually telling Lord Baratheon? When he gets this message from Rhaenyra, what was in it that made him like visibly angry? Because you can't think of it, it was more probably just like, you know, I am making myself queen, you know, and I would ask for your support, you know, your family swore an oath to me and all that. How does that make him go to be so angry? And so there had to be something where the Maester worded it wrong, whether that's intentionally or not intentionally. The way that information can just change. If you ever think about, for instance, rumors, right? If you have a rumor, say, again, when you're younger, it's more prevalent when you're younger, but I guess this still happens when you're later in life. But you have a rumor that starts here, and slowly it just changes, and it becomes something completely different. That can be the exact same idea. It's just information in general. Or if you even just see like news stories, right? As the news stories get further and further away from a primary source, the information gets less and less reliable. It's usually how that goes. I gotta admit that Lady Dustin reminds me of a kook that rants about conspiracy theories, though. She does give off that vibe. And I think the thing with Lady Dustin is she has some interesting points and some good points, but she's also extremely biased. So, Jesse, you're all good. You're all good. Sun's out, guns out. Yeah. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say is that, yeah. I shouldn't even say that because I haven't worked out. Okay. So here's the thing. I haven't worked out consistently for like over a week in probably like 2 months almost. Just because like I've had my back issues have like, there was a period there where I thought, okay, I'm fine again. Like I was there was a point like 3 weeks ago probably where I was like, okay, I was fine waking up. I felt like maybe 90%. And then I started working out again, and things were fine. Didn't have any really problems. And then all of a sudden, just like, yeah. So now I'm kind of just been like, yeah, I'm going to take like a 2-3 month hiatus of just not working out and or running, which is kind of, not great, but whatever. The Maesters pretty much achieved their goal with the dragons gone. The only thing that still remains is the inbreeding, but there's only so much they can do with that. Yeah, I think the massive thing is the dragons, right? Because with the dragons, the Targaryens just had, for instance, right? Let's just use like right now terms. They had nukes. It's like if one country controlled all the nukes and no other country had nukes. Well, it's like, okay, that country can just constantly just be like, oh, you're stepping out of line. We have nukes. Is more or less what the Targaryens like had, where it's like if you went against them, and you have Jaehaerys on the throne. Jaehaerys did it perfectly, where it's like, step out of line. Maybe I fly over your castle with the dragon. I burn you to a crisp. Is more or less how that went. So if you are the Maesters, if you're the High Towers, if you are the Faith, how do you get the dragons out? Right? Like, how do you? There's only two ways. There's only two ways the problem gets solved. They tried them both. The first problem, or the first way to do it, is you marry into their family, so inherently you level the playing field. So if you're the High Towers, if you're the Faith, the Maesters, you want control of the dragons. And so if you have that, okay, if you have some dragons, you can equal the playing field out, because if this country now goes, we have nukes, and you also have nukes, well, now you're just like, okay, we're now in like common day right now where everybody has nukes. So it's like, there's no reason to use the nukes, or else lots of people die. And there's a bunch of carnage. And so that is the first option. If you're the High Towers or the Faith, this whole faction at Old Town is to just level the playing field. Now the second option is, okay, if we can't attain them, we destroy them. We make them have some sort of civil war, and they destroy themselves. Because Viserys, he mentions this in House of the Dragon, is completely right. The only thing that can really destroy the Targaryen house was itself. And that's what ends up happening. So we get to this point where, again, we see the Maesters tried. Or not the Maesters, the High Towers and the Maesters, I guess, tried. They tried with Maegor. Didn't work out. Maegor probably had some issues with reproduction, and so that didn't end up happening. So you've now had one fail. Now, you couldn't do it with Jaehaerys, because, again, already married to his sister. So, okay, the can kind of gets kicked down a bit, right? And you're constantly thinking, okay, how can we get on the throne? And that eventually is going to come to Viserys. And there's some very sus stuff that happens when Viserys becomes king. And again, there's some things we're kind of skipping over. If you look at the Great Council, there kind of seems like there's this plot against the Velaryons. Because now think about the Velaryons, right? When Rhaenys goes into that family, you now have a second branch of dragons. It's exactly what the High Towers want to do. And this is what every family in Westeros wanted to do. Let's not just get locked into just the High Towers. This is what everybody wanted, right? This whole idea that again, Rhaenyra was so important when people wanted to marry her, and the way they did this on the show is actually really good, is that everybody would want to marry her. You get dragons. It doesn't matter if Rhaenyra is ugly and nobody wants her that way. She has dragons. Her value is extremely large to anyone, because inherently you give yourself now a protection from the dragons having your own. And, the Great Council to me is an event that is just, there is a lot of suspicious activity going on. You have someone like Daemon who's rallying sellswords and, just garnering swords. You have Corlys Velaryon. Seems like he's preparing, if they lose this outcome, that there's going to be a war. So again, we see that there's this idea that already there was a shot at a war. And we also see that, again, there was a very suspicious death to one of Jaehaerys' sons. That was, again, he was going to inherit the throne. And he has a very suspicious death where he has like a pain and he gets treated or tries to get treatment and it only gets worse and then he dies. Well, I'm just, pointing this out. If I'm a maester and I'm in this situation, right, I would want to cause as much issues for the succession as possible. And that's exactly what ended up happening, right? Because when Jaehaerys inherently runs out of sons, well, what happens? You now go to the next generation, and now you cause issues because the issue that we see with the Dance of the Dragons, what comes first? The female older line or the closest male line, which is Viserys. So that whole thing happens in a very suspicious way. And that's the issue that I think most people have with it, is even if you do not agree with the Maester theory in general, you can't deny there's so many issues with things that happen that are not explained, that are just very suspicious, that involve the Maesters. So whether it's this idea of every Maester's involved, or there's a lot of them that have their own personal motivations, or maybe there's just a few that have, they're part of this, things just seem a little bit suspicious. Also, hold on. Let's just, like, move this down here. I just noticed that the light just, like, completely destroys that. You can't even see it. But, the Bracken line was top-notch in Hot D about Rhaenyra having dragons and doesn't need protection. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, you can't deny that, right? Like, what is Rhaenyra? Rhaenyra also has her own, like, personal bodyguard as well. So it's like, I don't know. 100% convinced that back issues are the leading cause of shitty attitude in Americans. Yeah. Josh, definitely could be. My back issues are definitely because when I was younger, I did not take care of myself. Like, just in so many different ways. Like, I could go on for a while about just things that I did when I was younger that's, like, just very dumb. So, again, this is just for anyone in here that's watching that's, like, younger than me, of, just, like, say you're, like, still in high school or something like that, or you're still, like, early in school. Take care of yourself, because that stuff will come back to bite you, whether it's just, normal hygiene, or, just making sure you have good posture, watching what you eat and stuff like that. It comes back. That's all I'll say. It comes back. I know it's an old person thing to say, but, things that I can't undo now. So that's all I'm going to say. Working too much? I mean, possibly. I definitely think, working out, like, I was working probably about 5-6 days a week. I mean, definitely didn't help, but yeah. Don't smoke. I quit a couple years back, and within like a week, I had more stamina. Yeah, I've never smoked, so I grew up with asthma, so it was kind of instilled into my mind to just not smoke. But for me personally, right, I have no problems if you smoke. I just never really saw the appeal of smoking, so I don't really have. That's one of the few issues I don't have. I mean, like, okay, so like the serious ones, right? Like that I'm like talking about, like, as in, like, smoking, alcoholism, things like that. No, never had a problem with that. It was just more like just general, I guess, health welfare. Can you drink room temperature water to make your asthma better? I have no idea. So, Holly, I will say I don't really have asthma anymore. It was something when I was growing up that this is my thing, right? I was diagnosed with asthma, like, from basically very young age, and I never really, like, felt it. And this is the thing, I stopped going to an asthma doctor when I was like 13. I've never really had problems with my asthma. Like, I've never had, like, coughing stuff, never really needed an inhaler. I used, again, running, I used to do all the time. I never had problems with, like, my asthma or anything like that, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you, Holly. Also, nice to see you as well. Hi, Haley. Down with the Maesters. I agree, 100%. I think I was about to say the Maesters. Maegor was on the right track. That's all I'm gonna say. Managing calories too. People don't realize. Yeah, that's a big one. And, you know, I'm someone that, again, I for a while just thought, okay, I could just diet without counting calories, and or at least like getting a rough estimate of what I'm putting into my body. And when okay, so for me, right, I was very much obese, like very much like overweight. Um, when I first started, like I lost probably my first 20 pounds without even like really counting my calories at all. Just kind of like not eating as much snacks and stuff like that, and just like doing any type of physical activity, like just walking, or back then, like maybe jogging like half a mile. I mean, yeah, but I do agree, Paul. Just kind of understanding what you're putting in your body is very important. Especially since watching House of the Dragon 2, they were not helpful at all. Again, that's what doesn't make any sense either. So we're going to get to that as well with Viserys' reign, is how does like a little cut completely destroy Viserys' life? And basically be one of the reasons he dies. How that just doesn't make any sense. And the other thing is, like, how do the Maesters not understand how to treat this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. They go to college for this. It's like for instance saying that, you know, you went to school to be a doctor for however many years, and you came out of it and you just didn't know how to treat the common cold. Like, I don't know. It's very, yeah. I was chubby then. Without the school's gym, I went fat. Well, here's how I'll look at it, right? I just, yeah, I can relate, Holly. You know, but here's the thing. For me, I was just like chubby pretty much my whole life. Like this is easily the thinnest I've been in my entire life. I can put it this way. I can wear shirts of when I was in like 6th, 7th grade now, and that was like at least 10 years ago. So, yeah. And that's in the period where your body is growing the most. Like, it's not like, okay, I'm 25 and I'm wearing something from like or like I'm 35 and wearing something that when I was 25. But it's fishy. They seem to have much better access to medicine than real medieval physicians, but they seem to keep this knowledge themselves. Yes, a great point. Um, Fair point, Holly. I've been actually meaning to ask, how do you feel about the House of the Stag joining the Greens? Okay, so we'll talk about this, because I've known about what his name was gonna be, and I've just not said anything for like at least probably 6 months now. And he kind of talked about like what he wanted to do with his channel. So I've known a lot of what he's wanted to do for a while. Um, and I think here's the thing, right? I love his name. I think his name is perfect. It's the timing of his name that makes it very interesting. Like how we're talking about in this stream, right? Old Town controls all of the media, controls how we know information in A Song of Ice and Fire. They write all of the histories that we're reading. Fire and Blood, right there. Um, it's a perfect name because the voice of Old Town. It's like, yeah, if you were in Westeros, you were gonna have a podcast, you were gonna have a show, you were gonna have whatever, it would be in Old Town, like, or you would originate from Old Town. So it makes perfect sense. But yeah, him being a Green supporter, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. You know, he's a good guy, but he's flawed, and he had the audacity to say Aegon the Second is the rightful king, or off of customs or whatever. I'm just saying, okay. If Viserys, who is the king, right? We live in a world where there's no, in Westeros, there is no secondary government. There's nobody checking Viserys. If Viserys says Rhaenyra is the heir, he is the heir, or she is the heir. Man, let's not get into that, right? That's a whole different issue. I mean, we're going to talk about that era here in a second, but man, after 4 years of failure and humiliation, I finally succeeded, even though I'm getting a little fat. Studying in Iraq is one of the most difficult studies in the world. Mar, I'm very proud of you, and you know, we're always going to be here for your successes, your failures, and it's okay to fail, right? It's okay to make mistakes, just learn from it and stuff, and that's all you can really do. And yeah. Team Green for the win. Any other Green boys here? Paul. Don't start saying things like that. That's just no good. That's no good. The Hightowers bailed on Alicent as if she doesn't exist after the war. Yep, that's kind of the Hightower mentality, right? It's just like, what can we do that doesn't get us into conflict and keep us in the good graces? What gains us power? Ugh. It just swallowed there, and it was like, oh, just was not good. But yeah, let's kind of, so we're gonna get further into it. So Viserys becomes king. And again, we're getting into the point where we know a lot of this from House of the Dragon, but there's some things that they just kind of left out. And so what I think is really important to understand is the way that history has kind of come down. And we always say, okay, history is written by the victors. Well, okay, again, okay, also I want to point out for this whole like section of the stream, if you're somebody in the chat, you're someone rewatching this is going to have heavy House of the Dragon spoilers. We are going to talk a lot about, the end result, things that happen in there. Okay. So let's kind of get into it. All right. And so the end result here is you have Aegon III on the throne. And the Blacks end up winning. In my opinion, right, the line goes through Daemon and Rhaenyra. So their side, in my opinion, wins. If you go off of that idea. So when we look at the history is written by the victors, the Greens are not the victors on the face value of it. But when we look at it from the Greens' point of view, or again, I think the Hightowers overall, or the Maesters, yes, we don't have our line on the throne anymore. But we got rid of all the dragons. It's one of those things where I think you take the wins with the losses, where on one side of it, you're sitting here going, okay, I mean, we're not on the throne. We did lose a lot of power, and this was a very bloody conflict for us, but I mean, we also brought the Targaryens down a peg as well. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I would argue that it was kind of a iffy for both sides. But at this point, I want to point something out here, because when we look at how the sides are described, Daemon and Otto are characters that actually have a couple qualities that are very similar. They're both very ambitious people. And when we look at the way this is described, Daemon in Fire and Blood is always described as all the negative qualities. If he's ambitious, it's like, oh, he's that ambitious brother and he's power hungry. But then Otto comes over and he's like, oh yeah, Otto Hightower, he's a cunning guy and all that. And so you really get this double standard, and you can definitely tell the bias towards Otto. But what another bias here that we see is the histories apparently do not like the warrior types or the dragon rider types of history, right? These characters like Maegor and Daemon are two characters that, yes, they have their flaws. They actually do inherently a lot of good for the Targaryens as well. Yes, they do bad things as well. So they should have, again, their good and their bad. That's just not apparent, right? Daemon comes off as the villain, where, again, Otto Hightower, it's said that he just straight up hates Daemon. Like, they just do not like each other. And there isn't really a reason given outside of just maybe Daemon slept with Alicent. And that kind of comes out of nowhere. It feels like it's like just a random excuse that the Maesters come up with to make Otto not look like he had a bias against Daemon already. It's a really weird segment of the story. But I don't know. Do you believe that the theory that Aegon is sterile and that I don't think so, Mar. I would say no. I almost turned to the green side, but how hot D turned them ugly. Oh dear, Matthew. Even the books, I was for Rhaenyra and Daemon. Yeah, so Zach, I was as well. I personally just rooted for Rhaenyra. For a lot of the reasons I rooted for Stannis, because I was like, okay, these are the two people that should have been on the throne, and they're not. They get basically skipped over. And I thought, again, even reading it, right, one of my major takeaways was, okay, the Greens come off very sus. Like, there's just things that happen in the story and the build up to the conflict that I'm like, this seems awfully suspect to one side more than the other. Otto and Daemon are both ambitious. You might even call them, when two are ambitious, they tend to not, yeah. And that's the whole issue, right? Is that Daemon and Otto are very alike in a lot of things. And so why is one character being described as basically the villain and the other one's like getting all the praise? And then you get even further, it's like Otto and the Maesters and Hightower and Old Town as a whole wanted Rhaenyra to be the queen over Daemon becoming king. But what does that tell you? Well, that tells you at this point of the story, or at this point of the timeline, they were completely fine with a woman being on the throne. But now we jump a few years later, and, you know, Viserys has male children, and all of a sudden that's now flipped. Shows, again, a lot of that personal bias and kind of how things were operating. And now let's even look at, right, when Viserys remarries. Why is the only candidate, again, this is my biggest problem, is that, yes, Laena Velaryon is very young. And she is the only person that's offered up to Viserys. The only person. Because this was obviously a ploy. I think most of the people realized who Viserys was as a character and knew he wasn't going to marry Laena. And so, we look at this idea, it's like, okay, if they were serious and this wasn't just like a show, would they not have brought up more people that made more sense? Like, the High Towers are in Viserys' pocket. Otto is the hand of the king. All of Otto's power and the High Tower power right now is going through Viserys keeping him as hand of the king and giving them more power. It doesn't make any sense for him to marry Alicent, okay? And yes, you cannot marry Laena, that's fine. Look for other people. There's other families that you have no ties to at all that you could use to strengthen your family. So, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things where I just look at this, and it's like the same thing. It's the same exact scenario we are going to see with Rhaenyra's marriage, where it's like nobody offers up any actual like choices, and we just give them one. It's just one choice that we obviously know is not going to go well. And we'll get there in a second. Blacks have inherency and legitimacy, but because of the death of Daemon, the Greens won. Story ended. I mean, yeah, I think it's a weird thing, like, because the Greens win because technically Rhaenyra dies before Aegon does. But then after Aegon, it's like, okay, well, all of Aegon's line is gone. Like, the Hightower line is gone. It's dead. So, I don't know. But yes, Haley, I agree. We hate those nasty Greens. It was, in the end, it was no one won. It was a nightmare for House Targaryen. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Paul. I also get that the dragons were fucking devastating and dangerous as fuck, but it hurt my feelings that they all got murdered and they're... Yes, Zach, I agree. Hi, Sterling, how are you? I wouldn't say the Greens won because of Daemon's death because of Cregan Stark. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think the Greens won, and I agree with you there, but I think if Daemon hadn't died, like if Daemon had just killed Aemond, I think the Blacks won easily. But, you know, a lot of speculation there. I feel like Rhaenyra is pure dragon blood, unlike the boys, even though they are his kids. I feel like she is more of a... Yeah, I definitely agree, Haley. The common people and traitors were Rhaenyra's downfall. I mean, I would say that, along with Rhaenyra being a person that just, when she started losing her children, she is just someone that was very inactive. She didn't do enough during the war to really win it. And that was to the detriment of a lot of people, like Rhaenys. Probably already covered this, but there's Maesters killed off all of Jaehaerys' kids. Of course, they were involved. Yeah, so I only touched on one of them because that's kind of the major one, I think. But yeah, I definitely see your point there. I heard Voice of Old Town is a secret Green supporter. He is. Give him hell. Everybody he uploads, just be like Green supporter. You can put it from the Grease Goblins if you'd want. You can put it from Eric. It's just how it is. Just how it is. Cregan Stark or Cregan. I don't know how people say his name. I don't know if it's Cregan or Cregan. I don't know. Was the ultimate Giga Chat of the series? Yes. Balin didn't die. He fled north to become Bale the Bard. Okay, fair enough, Jesse. What happens to Alicent and her dad? Well, you know, there's a little bit of spoiler talk, but they end up dying, more or less. Otto is killed like right when Rhaenyra takes the city, and then Alicent's a little bit later. I kind of hope they change that in Hot D and put Rhaenyra more in the action since she was so passive. Yeah, I agree, but the issue is like that's just I think one of Rhaenyra's like character traits is like she's just a very passive character, right? Think about how most of her loved ones die. It's because of her being passive, not taking that leadership role, letting others do it, and they end up getting themselves killed. So House Targaryen could have been powerful if they worked together. Yeah, I agree. They could have, right? But this is, I think, the issue with some of my interpretation of House of the Dragon. When there's this idea that Rhaenyra puts forth this idea, okay, let's unite our claims, right? Like, let's marry my children, your children, all of that. And then Alicent rejects it. It takes away all of the idea of there ever being that idea of making peace. Because now, again, the issue is always going to become the Greens, in my opinion, have lost a lot of like of me viewing their cause as like, okay, yeah, they weren't always about war. They would have taken a peaceful route because Rhaenyra handed that on a silver platter. Now, it does make sense that Alicent would deny it, right? In her character arc, that makes sense. But it's something that I just don't understand why they did in the show. It didn't really make any sense, in my opinion. But I don't know. So getting back to kind of the Maester stuff, and let's kind of get to, I think, the next biggest point. The next biggest point here is Rhaenyra, who is she going to marry? And the only person that is brought, the only person, is Laenor. This is not this idea in the show where Rhaenyra gets to pick who she marries and all this, and she goes on all these tours and, you know, all this. That doesn't happen. In the show or the book, it's they have a little sit down and they're like, yeah, Laenor, he's the perfect guy. And at face value, yeah, right? This is something where the Maesters can be like, oh yeah, we offered a good suggestion, it just didn't work out, and stuff like that. And Otto can save face being like, hey, Viserys, you know how you screwed up and married my daughter? Well, how about, you know, your daughter then marry the Velaryons? Well, the issue here is Laenor is gay or bisexual, something in there, and he doesn't really like women. So, okay, everyone knew this. It wasn't like a secret. Like, it was more in your face than probably Renly was. For instance, in King's Landing with, like, you know, the small council. Like, it was well known. It wasn't really a secret. And so, well, okay, what is this going to mean now? Well, obviously, Rhaenyra is not going to have any children. Doesn't really make any sense. And so, okay, what do the Maesters say to this, right? Like, what does the Grand Maester at this time say in this little meeting? He says, "Oh, Laenor will get over it. I don't like fish, but I like, you know, I still eat it." Like, you're gonna compare you not liking a food to someone not having a sexual preference with the gender you're trying to marry them off to. Like, huh? So it comes off again very, very sus. Because now, right after this moment, right, you've set up Rhaenyra for failure. Because you know Rhaenyra is not, she's not going to be able to have kids. And if she does have kids, they're going to be bastards. And so now you can spin the whole narrative, right? This is the thing that the Greens do so well. They control what the narrative is. They control information that's being spread. And so what ends up happening is, oh, you remember like maybe 5-10 minutes ago when I told you guys how Otto and the Hightowers and the Maesters all were like, yeah, Rhaenyra, she should be the heir. Yeah, you remember her? Yeah, she should be here. Nope. She's a whore now. She's giving birth to bastards. She's doing all sorts of crap. She's messing around with Daemon. Like, oh my God, can you believe it? Like, come on. Are we really going to sit back here and say, oh, yeah, man, this is so bad? You set her up to do this. They set her up to fail. Just, yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Did they suggest Aegon in the books for Rhaenyra? I don't think so. I don't remember, honestly. I don't remember, honestly, Matthew. But who knows? Adult Laenor in the show is fantastic. I was so happy that he escaped. I really liked the actor that played Laenor. Was I happy that he escaped? No, because it leaves way too many questions that I have, and maybe that'll get solved in the show, but as of right now, I have a lot of questions about that. Book Rhaenyra is a better queen than TV Rhaenyra. I don't know if I'd go that far, Holly, because the thing with Book Rhaenyra is that she's much more quick to violence. She's much more cruel, and her emotions have very much taken over by this point of the story in the book. In the show, she does seem more level-headed than Book Rhaenyra. So I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with that, actually. And if she did have children, they're legitimately... Yeah, exactly, Metal. Exactly. So again, the exact point that we see with, like, say, Renly, right? If Renly would have had children, or Marjorie would have had children, let's put it that way. If Marjorie would have had children, instantly people would have been like, are those Renlys? That is the exact point we're making here, is that either way, it was a lose-lose situation for Rhaenyra. Like, yes, she gains the support of the Velaryons, who, again, are they are a top 3 powerful house right now. Probably, outside the Targaryens, they're number 2. So, it's a good match in terms of, on the face value of it, but what it does for Rhaenyra is awful. It's bad. And, like, something that would have made much more sense, right? So, you say you make Rhaenyra... She allies with somebody. She marries some other big house. Then their children marry into the Velaryon family. That would have made more sense for the Targaryens if they wanted to secure their actual power. Or if Viserys just wanted to not have all the issues and just basically marry into the Velaryons himself. That would have gone a long way. Or just not marrying again. I mean, he could have done that as well. Also, hi, Violet. How are you? I don't know about you guys, but the series is very similar to Game of Thrones in terms of changing the important events. The series does not show the real characters of the books in its ugly truth. Mar, to a degree, I will agree. Now, I will give House of the Dragon a bit more of a pass than Game of Thrones, because Fire and Blood, we don't particularly know as much about the personalities of the people, so you can have your interpretation, right? And I think a lot of the interpretation that we see with the House of the Dragon one is kind of the Maester view on characters like Daemon and Rhaenyra, and maybe not Rhaenyra, maybe Daemon. There's certain characters that just seem like all over the place when like you look at them from Fire and Blood. So I would agree with you on that. Now Game of Thrones, yeah, there's certain characters that don't really come off the way they did in the book. Like Catelyn's a character I really look at as a character that is not the same at all from book to show. And yeah, I just think you have some certain things where it's like you have aging gaps and stuff like that. Like Ned is a very kind of young guy. Like he's still in his, 30s, and Sean Bean just isn't. So you just kind of have that different thing there. But yeah, I kind of agree on that. I kind of believe more that they tried, but Laenor's infertile. Okay, so I would be interested, right? What are your guys' thoughts on Laenor actually being like Alan's like father and Adam's father, like instead of Corlys? I think Corlys is the more common theory, but what do you guys think about like Laenor actually being the father? Because I know there was a scene, and this is something that the voice of Old Town, I'm still getting used to that. I almost said House of the Stag. One of the hot takes on his video when he came back, I think it was like 2 days ago, one of the people suggested like that Laenor was the father because there's this line that Laenor tried to be, I guess, with women, and it just didn't work out. Now, the way I took that is that Laenor kind of had a situation with like Marjorie, where it was like he was trying, but he just like he couldn't, get excited, and just didn't go anywhere from there. That's the way I saw it. Not as he actually had sex with a woman, but I don't know. I wish Laenor made life easy. Yeah, that'd be nice as well, Holly. Is Seasmoke still on Dragonstone or Driftmark? He's on Driftmark, I believe, Metal. The only thing I like is that Aemon is just a weakling who became a bully, and what he did killed Luke and how he started the war. So, Amar, I really do like the way that they implemented his character from a young age, because we don't see that at all in the book. We don't know much about that at all. I, again, still have a lot of question marks about Aemon doing it on accident. I have question marks about how they're going to go with about a lot of the questions I have about season 1 and why I kind of look at it right now as like season 5 quality of a Game of Thrones is there's just so many questions that I'm like, why did we just do this? Like, why didn't we just go the route that was already established that nobody had a problem with? Like, why did we just kind of do something else? But I don't know. I have a funny suspicion that the show might do Vaymond as the father of Adam and Alan. That would be interesting as well. I don't know if I'd like that. I kind of like the idea of just Corlys being the father, but whatever, I guess. I don't know. So, again, we get through the Dance of the Dragons, and I think another very important point to make here. 2 important points. The first one we already talked about, so I won't go over it too much in this stream, but is the idea of, again, one of the important parts we're talking about, like with House of the Dragon, is Luke's death. And so that's prompted by a couple things happening. The Baratheons are very angry by this letter that they get, or he gets from Rhaenyra. And again, I just struggled to understand what could possibly have been in this letter that would have pissed off him that much. And we know he couldn't read, so a maester had to decipher what was on there, and then tell it to him. What made him so angry? Like, why couldn't he just been like, yeah, no, I already got something with Aemond. You know, thanks for the offer. Like, what made him just erupt into anger? I like, that's something I just do not understand. There had to have been some sort of manipulation going on there, or misinterpretation of what Rhaenyra was saying. Because why would Rhaenyra want to piss him off? He's trying to get him as an ally. It doesn't make any sense. And so we get to another point, right, where we look at this and it's like, okay, Aegon has now taken the throne. So Aegon's on the throne. Rhaenyra's a Dragonstone. And now we all of a sudden have this offering of peace. And the offer that Rhaenyra gets for peace is laughably bad. It's like, I don't remember which sons it is, but one of the literal things is, oh yeah, you know, we'll take, you know, 2 of your sons and we'll make them like cupbearers and stuff. And it's like, what? Why would she give you hostages? What? Huh? And then they're like, oh yeah, we will grant you Dragonstone. She already owned Dragonstone. It's one of the worst offers I've ever seen. Like, it's such bad, like, oh, like sometimes we look at like Rob's like offer to Lannisters and it's like, okay, they're not going to give you the whole North. This was even worse. It was just laughably bad. The letters are very suspicious in Song of Ice and Fire as a whole. I 110% agree, Violet. I feel bad for Vaymond. I don't, Tolly. I don't. He was being, you know, you can't go against the queen. That's all I gotta say. He just didn't like a woman bossing him around. He was getting something out of the situation. I agree. Yes, Paul, I believe that was Barbary Dustin. She was the one kind of talking about like how, like, again, they are the ones that teach us how to read. They are the ones that are whispering in our ears. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it was her. What do you think the fate of the Old Town and what is the fate of the Citadel in A Dream of Spring? So, I definitely think it's going to continue. Like, I don't think it's going to be like burned to a crisp or anything by Euron. I think it will be like sacked. I think he will initially win. But, you know, you're asking about the fate. I would say more or less it's going to continue, right? As being a religious hub, a place of more or less of a college. Again, advancing studies and things like that. I don't think we're going to like see it just stop. Like I think a lot of other places will be. Vaymond was telling the truth. Well, sometimes the truth hurts, and he should have just held in the truth to himself. Just like Ned, he should have kept it to his grave. Okay, Holly. Let me just like put this right out there. I don't think any piece the Greens offered would have worked. I think Rhaenyra was too far in deep on she was the queen. Her actions at this point of the story were just she was someone that was going to become queen. I don't think there was anything the Greens could have done, but I think they could have made it a little better. Like, they could have given a better attempt. It kind of just seems like they just threw it out there to say, oh, we tried. And I'm like, really? Did you? Like, you're giving her all the stuff she already has, and then you're making her children hostages. The old town is getting destroyed for sure. Interesting, Jesse. Thank you, Paul, for answering that for Turd. I could see the Citadel be put to the torch like the Great Library of Alexandria. That could be possible. I guess I'm just not like that. I guess I'm just like, I think it could be like sacked as in like, oh, it's looted, it's pillaged or whatever, but like, it's not going to be just stop being a thing. I think it's going to continue, but I agree, Violet. Like, if I'm the Greens, right, and I have, you know, made peace, there's still a threat. Like, I still would have tried to kill them at some point. But yeah, I agree with that, Violet. Oh, and Mar, I do not. I don't even care about that show, but I mean, yeah, hopefully that gets canceled. I don't want HBO putting their resources into that. I just like, why? It just doesn't need to happen. Don't even get me started with that. They should have made a marriage alliance between Jace and Helena. Rhaenyra should have gone to Viserys with the offer instead of bringing it up to... Yeah, I agree. I think Rhaenyra going to Alicent was more like Rhaenyra understanding that Alicent was the person that was really in control. When in reality, she should have gone to Viserys. Because if Viserys could have just overruled Alicent, he's the king. He could have done that. Hi, Ghost. How are you? So, again, those are kind of the major points of the dance. There's just a lot of things that the Maesters do that set up that point. And so, we see that kind of work its magic, right? The dragons come down, and, well, now you have a weakened Targaryen state. Now, this is kind of where we have a lot of gray period. There's one more kind of massive thing here, is that when Aegon III is becoming king, right before he comes of age, there's actually a Maester that's in charge for like an entire, I think, year. And it's very interesting and peculiar that after that point, no dragons hatch anymore. It's also very interesting to think that, okay, now that the dragons are gone, no dragon eggs hatch in Westeros anymore. But yet, in Essos, where there aren't any Maesters, and they can't get their hands on them, they're fine. We end up seeing Dany's eggs are probably, again, the ones that hadn't been in Westeros for a while with Alyssa Farman. So, yeah, a little sus. I don't know how, again, I don't know how that they would maybe poison them or stop them from hatching. But it's very suspect. All I'll say. Other things you could point to, but I don't know like how far they go, is that we look at when Rhaenyra is in King's Landing, you also have the idea that, okay, a lot of religious stuff going on. Again, Rhaenyra was not ruling well, so it would have been very easy to rile up the people. But that, again, also could have been enforced by the faith, the Maesters, people that had power with the Greens. Do you think the series will be a romance between Jon and Sansa, or will it be complete idiocy about being behind the wall? It'll be probably just Jon fucking around and behind the wall. Probably what it's going to be. Honestly, I kind of hope that's what it is. I'd rather it just be Jon. If it's going to be a show, just him having his own little mental battles and stuff. Violet, we need to know. We need to know. I know that the Maesters poisoned the leftover dragon eggs when Aegon III exiled them out of his sight. Yeah, that's what I kind of believe, Holly. I'm not sure if they would have done that. I don't know what poison it would have affected that. But, yeah, I agree. Do you think it was the quality of the eggs or the Targaryens? It can't be the Targaryens. Because we start seeing, like, Targaryens, even after this era, that would have seemed worthy of those eggs over, again, people that were getting eggs that weren't strong, weren't worthy people. So I would have to say it has to be the eggs. It has to be something with the eggs. It can't just be the Targaryens all of a sudden. Do you think how HBO will give us the budget to have true? There are quite a few. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's a thing, right? You're gonna have so many battles going on, right? There's a period in this war where it's just battle after battle after battle after battle. So hopefully they do, but who knows? Maybe certain marriages and childbirths add or change different genes. I guess that could be possible. But then my question would be, Metal, how all of a sudden is Dany then able to birth the eggs? If it's all about the Targaryens, how did all of a sudden these genes just come back to Dany? It doesn't really like make that much sense in my opinion. El Camino, like Jon Snow movie, I could get behind that. Yeah, I kind of agree, Matthew. I think that's really the only way you go with a show like that. I think the leftover dragons migrated elsewhere or were killed off. I definitely agree with that, Holly. And that's my thing is like Dany's eggs are the only eggs that we know that were not like there's no tampering done with them that the Maesters could have done. That's why it's super suspect. But yeah, the Blackfire Rebellions with dragons would be insane. As long as we get a true battle above gods, I am cool. Fair enough, Sterling. Sea Snake series will be a complete failure, I assure you. Okay, so this is my thing that I do not understand. So they were planning to do a Corlys Velaryon show. And yet, in House of the Dragon, they just didn't like build him up as a fan favorite character at all. Like, there's episodes where he's just missing. He's just not part of the series. It makes no sense. Good question. There was a lot of factors in the hatching of Miriam Azur's Kingsblood. They were close to a pregnant Targaryen for you. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I agree, but I think it's much easier to point to the idea of the eggs being the factor and not Dany herself. Or even, again, I think the blood magic stuff could have been a big effect, but I also think it's the idea that these dragon eggs, you know, there was no tampering done to them whatsoever. If Daemon practices blood magic with the unhatched eggs, he'll be just like Daenerys. Yes. As well as the series 10,000 ships. Yeah. The issue is like, if you are HBO, how do you do a show that has enough like attention from the casual audience, but it's also something that like, it's not just Game of Thrones again. And that's the issue is like a show like Nymeria and all that is like, nobody really cares about it. If you're a casual like fan that doesn't really know much about the lore, you wouldn't give a shit about this. I'm a Song of Ice and Fire fan. We are all Song of Ice and Fire fans in here. I don't particularly give a shit about this show. Could it be interesting? Sure. Do I have any interest in it? No. Like, why do this series when you could do Aenys / Maegor's reign, when you could do Aegon's conquest, when you could do Dunk and Egg stuff? There's just no point. Like, there's so much more interesting stuff. You could even just do like, you could do more or less a Game of Thrones story, like how Rogue One is. You could just do a random story, just like you could have a town like, again, the Dunk and Egg, second novella, perfect. It's like a small like area, just a normal lord. Have that just be a show. Like you could just do something like that. I don't. It just doesn't make sense to me. She did kill Drogo in the pyre with the eggs around her. That is true. Maybe Dany is Azor Ahai, and that's the reason she was able to hatch eggs. Maybe. I wonder if Helena ever liked her father. I don't know. That's a very interesting question, Holly. Have you seen The Witcher? I have not watched any of The Witcher stuff. The only book I've read is The Blood of the Elves, which I got done reading. I thought it was good. It wasn't great. It was good, not great. I felt like there was just something missing. Like the ending of it just felt like there should have been more there. Like I don't know. It was. I'm not gonna get into it because again, I haven't read the first 2 books before it, which is what I was supposed to do, which I didn't know. So I won't judge it yet. But it does feel like inherently it doesn't follow like a normal story structure, where it's like, you know, you have your climax. It's kind of like that back like 3/4 area. It doesn't really feel like there was one. Like it just kind of felt like it was good, right? It was good. but it wasn't like great. Like, it didn't really like. There was no like, oh, Ned Stark dies moment. There was no like Gandalf moment with the Balrog. It was very like, it's like, okay, all right. I mean, things happened, but I don't know. I don't know. Jingle Bell is a stallion who mounts the world. I agree. Plus, they kind of shot themselves in the foot with the last season. The book fans could appreciate something like Sea Snake or Nymeria, but it left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth. I agreed. Witcher 3 is my favorite game, but damn, are the books hard to read. It's not like Jordan. Yeah. I've noticed that. And I don't mind it, right? I like, this is the thing, okay? I like The Witcher, the parts of the book that I've read, I really liked was any of the stuff with like Ciri, with Triss, with what's her name? It's the one that starts with like a Y. It's the love interest. I don't know. All of those are good because it's like really good character building, and I really like that journey for Ciri. That's really nice. I also thought one of my favorite elements of the story, like, is the idea of, they're with these dwarves. Again, this is spoilers for The Witcher. We're getting off topic. Yennefer, that's it. Thank you, Matthew. Where they're with these dwarves, and there's a really interesting like idea, like, what do you do if your race? So again, there's these dwarves, and what do you do when your race is an open kind of rebellion almost, where you're being kind of mistreated? Again, there's a lot of division, a lot of racism going towards other cultures that are not human. Well, what do you do? Like, do you go in open war with them? What do you do? Like, do you not create conflict? One of the most interesting lines is like the dwarf leader, I forget his name, but he basically says, like, I don't want to destroy everything that's been built by going into war. And I thought that was a really, really interesting line, a really interesting take. Those are some of the things I really liked about it. I just didn't really feel like the first book that I read really hit the heights of anything. Like, it didn't really feel like we really got going at any point. Yes, that is Yarpen. Again, Jesse, I have not watched The Witcher at all. So I've been told bad things about it just because of kind of the going away from the books and stuff like that, but I do not know. This is probably where we're going to leave the stream for today. Again, we have more we could do, but we kind of hit like most of what I wanted to hit in this stream. There's not a lot. The issue again is we don't know a lot about this time period from Aegon, after Aegon the Third's reign, to really up until like Aegon the Fifth and stuff like that. But yeah. Are you going to watch Rings of Power Season 2? If I do, and I really doubt it, Jesse, I really doubt it, it'll be going on my second channel, because there's just Lord of the Rings stuff on that channel. It's going to be very casual. Like, when I was reviewing Rings of Power, I was treating it like House of the Dragon. Like, I was, putting notes down for all of the scenes. I was deeply analyzing it. If I do it again, it's just going to be something where I'm going to watch it through once, and it's just going to be my raw thoughts. I'm not really going to do anything, but I maybe. I'll give you guys a maybe. When we get closer to it, I might do it just to, yeah, but it'll definitely be on my second channel. So if you are not subscribed to the second channel, do that, because those will be on there. Because the Maesters have been involved with the Blackfire Rebellion. They definitely could have been. I don't think nearly as much, though. I think there was just a lot more players that had that going, but could there have been people whispering in Aegon the Fourth's like shoulder or ear, basically going, oh yeah, maybe you should have Daemon be the true heir and things like that? Yeah, it's very possible, Violet. We just don't know. Like, we don't have enough information. And that's what's interesting about Fire and Blood Part 2, is that hopefully we'll get more of that. But yeah, thank you guys all for coming in the stream and talking some Maester conspiracy stuff with me.